Welcome, Wargamers, yet again to the infernal wastes and dangerous plains of the Immortal Realms, because today we are going to dive into this year's Animosity campaign narrative. I'm very excited about the changes they made to the format this year. I think it's going to be a great time, and there's some really compelling story stuff. So for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, every year a bunch of volunteers get together and put together a worldwide campaign that basically takes one story within the setting of the Mortal Realms, a fan-made lore story, and allows players from all across the globe to influence how it goes. So for 6 weeks, you're given basically a story prompt, you complete games to get votes into how you respond, and then the story progresses based on everyone's collated data. It's intended to be an incredibly fun and relaxed way to invigorate the hobby, get people excited to do stuff, because of course, as gamers, there's not an equal access to campaigns and narrative things across the globe, so this is something we can all participate in. They give us a setting and a central story, and then several factions that are all taking different approaches to solving whatever that problem might be. We'll talk more about the factions in upcoming videos. Today we're going to focus on the actual setting of Animosity 4, known as the Bleeding Wilds. So we'll start off by explaining the background for this year, and then I'll end the video by talking about how you can join in with this campaign. And keep in mind, you can participate in this with anything from painting, lore writing, games played, and more. It is not strictly about gaming. It's just a celebration of all aspects of the hobby. One of my favorite stories from last year was that Kenzie got votes for her corn army by baking cookies or something like that. There was a story built into it. It was all kind of wrapped together, but it was this fun little thing of you can do just about anything and get hobby scores. And this year, our story once again follows the River, a magically infused waterway that links all of the realms in an endless circuit. A continuation from last year's Animosity campaign, which was set in Hish. We're essentially following that river downstream. And this year's location that we're talking about is the Bleeding Wilds, a very curious place that is going to require a bit of explaining. I don't know if you need a bong rip or a huge shot of whiskey. Something is recommended to open up your mind, because this singular location of the Bleeding Wilds is composed of 2 geographical locations. One is known as Silverside. This is in Chamon, the realm of metal. It's dominated by mountains. However, the River has flowed so aggressively into this area that what are used to be mountain ranges have now become these little islands. It's almost like a waterway just suddenly dropped itself into a mountain range. The rivers flow wildly here, and it's just a very aggressive place. If you're not familiar with the realm of metal, it is essentially a place of alchemical, constant change. It's rich in natural resources, so you have, all of your, of course, metals, that makes perfect sense, but expensive gems, jewels. It's a heavy emphasis on magic, specifically when it comes to transmutation, so turning things from one substance into another, which we saw a few times in specifically the Realmgate Wars, the opening story arc of Age of Sigmar. And while it has all of these resources that war machines, the armies that we play, need, you need iron to make weapons and all these kinds of things, it is very, very sparse on others. So it's very sparse on food, on natural wildlife, things like that. It's a hard place for life to foster because everything's just rocks and minerals and materials and transmutating, and there's all kinds of magic going around. It's a very interesting place. So that's one of our 2 locations. The second is called the Badlands of Lahar in Gur. Now, this is also a region that is dominated by a peculiar mountain range, however there's no water. And this kind of fits into more of a stereotypical plains of Gur type thing. I mean, there's obviously monsters living in the mountains, you have wide open stretches of savanna that people have to cross, lots of beasts of burden and things like that. There's lots of food, which is a good counterpoint to Chamon, where food is very scarce, but of course Gur is lacking in natural mineral deposits, things like that. So the 2 complement each other very well, but they're very different. So you might be thinking, Doug, how can we be in the Bleeding Wilds and yet still be in 2 different places? Let's talk about what connects these 2 things and makes them relevant. I'm going to read you the entry lore bit, the synopsis, kind of the sales pitch, if you will, for this year's Animosity. You can find the entire document with all the information regarding the different coalitions, which are what they call factions, in the description below. So all the documentation is down below if you want to read along or read this further yourself. Calamity has fallen in the aftermath of the River. the mystic waterway binding all realms, bursting its banks and overflowing. Regions of Chaman and Gur, suffused with its waters, have begun to bleed into each other, their physical boundaries shifting and interweaving. The peoples of these lands are in turmoil. Some seek to profit in the chaos, while others fight for their very survival. What remains is a shifting landscape of steely hills and bone-strewn gorges known as the Bleeding Wilds. At the heart of this outlandish territory lies an opportunity. In ages past, the great dragon Majra Rao, I'm going to editor's note here, just kind of throw in the term God Beast, was torn asunder, her form sealed in the heart metals of Chaman, and her spirit bound in the living stone of Gur. It's her will to coalesce that has drawn these two realms together, seeking to be whole once more. Time grows short, however. The floodwaters have receded, and the magic that suffuses the land will soon dry out. The disparate tribes of realms of beast and metal race to seize Modra Ra's power for themselves before the magic of the bleed fades and the opportunity is lost. Some will thrive, many will perish, and those that master the bleed will shape the very fabric of the realms. Okay, end quote. So we have a location that's defined by a fluidity of substance, right? The walls between these two realms is super weak here, or at least has been weakened by the River, and what binds these two seemingly random locations across the realms is a god beast. Now I'm going to give you the ultimate synopsis I can of this story. Essentially, there was a god beast, no one knows who slays it. It's Modra Rao is how I'm going to pronounce it. Sorry, Animosity team, if I'm butchering that. But you asked a guy with a Midwest tongue to do your lore videos, and this is what you get. But essentially, it's a beast of incredible power, titanic in all its ways, and it was defeated by an unknown army and sundered into two. The physical form of this giant serpent reptilian-style monster is in Chaman. Its spirit, that primal animus and the power that it takes to basically turn that giant lump of stuff into a monster, like from inert to a living thing, is in Gur. Whatever has happened with the River has made it so that these two locations are kind of being pulled together by the will of this creature that's desperately trying to be made whole again. As the realms kind of overlap one another and it gets complicated, these events called bleeds start to come in fruition. So this would be like if you're walking down the street in Gur, for example, right? So there's beast, savanna, and all of a sudden a huge wall of river rushes past you because a bleed, a tear between the realms, had just opened up in front of you, and the waterways that are in Chaman poured into Gur. Likewise, you could be in a deep mine within Chaman, and all of a sudden creatures burst out of nowhere because the equal place in Gur is a nest full of all kinds of nasty creatures. And I like the idea that you have a destabilizing presence in the form of the River, two locations that seemingly have nothing to do with one another, but you know that they do because if you look, their mountain ranges are curiously, I guess, copy-paste of one another in a broad sense. So, like, there's something linking these locations, and that is, of course, the God Beast's body and spirit. And they're trying to come together, and the River has essentially facilitated this with raw magical energy. Like I said, if you want the full details and about the various coalitions that are going into this area to fight for it and stake claims or whatever, the PDF is in the description down below. But really, as a synopsis, I want to ask the question, why is this a good setting? And I like it because it taps into the ever-changing nature of the realms, and frankly, I'm a sucker for anything that bleeds realms together. Whenever there's a story where, like, a gate from one realm is, like, pouring their magic into another realm, and there's sort of this weird crossover, I'm here for it. Especially because the changes described in this document are extremely abrupt. Like, it's different if, you know, say you're in Guran, you're in a forest, and at some point you walk through a realm gate and it's forest on the other end too, and it kind of slowly becomes another realm. This is like all of a sudden there's just a sheer window of boom, a different type of existence that you did not comprehend a second ago. It's just a rad, harsh right turn. But more than just being, like, you know, lore-wise interesting, a campaign setting has exactly one job, and that is give me a reason to fight. And this very loose description that they put forward, I think, does that in spades. There's ample resources in Chaman. There's lots of reasons why factions go to that realm, whether it's for studying magic, gaining power, natural resources. Like, there's just a lot of things happening in Chamon. Same thing goes for Gur, but rather than resources, or I should say hard resources like minerals and stuff, it tends to be things like food, beasts you want to hunt, you need furs to keep warm, all these things. They are two very important locations to one another because we learned from books like the Cities of Sigmar that having trade between these realms is very, very vital. Specifically, food coming out of Gur and minerals from Chamon. The nature of these bleeds, these rifts where the realms kind of warp into one another, means that travelers and caravans can get caught up. So you have an army that's moving to go secure a location and all of a sudden they get ripped into a different realm where it has its own battles, its own struggles. Or if you're a caravan that gets washed away in this whole thing, there's valuable loot just laying around that armies are now trying to go seize. Basically saying it's a sweet arena of death. There's lots of reasons to be there, lots of reasons to die there, which means what? It's pure Warhammer. And so that is the basic gist of the setting for this year's Animosity. Like I said, I'm going to have 2 videos coming out regarding the coalitions, which thankfully don't have Lumineth style names, so I'm not going to trip over the names every time I try to mention them this year. Thank you, team. That was much appreciated. But let's talk about joining this year. I wanted to put this out as early as I could once I got better from COVID, just to kind of give people a chance to jump into Animosity and get used to the community. The most important thing you can do to join this campaign is to follow the link in the description down below and join the Animosity Discord. That's really where everything happens. It is a very large, vibrant community, well governed by admins, and just kind of has a lot of eyes to make sure everyone is welcome and feeling comfortable. I'm going to give you a quick tip here from a pro. Go ahead and immediately adjust your notification settings. The mods are really good about letting everyone know when updates happen and stuff like that, so you don't have to be receiving every notification. You'll lose your mind. It's a very active community, but it's a very good one. Now, the campaign launches on June 29th, so we have about a week here before it all begins. And when it does start, a few things are going to happen. Also, when you sign up for the Discord, you should get a role assigned. Essentially, you have to pick one of the different coalitions. Like I said, descriptions are in the link, or the PDF rather. You have to join a coalition, and then when the actual event starts on June 29th, let me say that again, it starts June 29th, and yet I'll still get comments about it. A few things will happen. One, you'll gain access to be able to start submitting entries, which we'll talk about in a second. And the second is that a special channel will open up in that Discord, allowing you access to your coalition. Every week, there is going to be a series of narrative prompts. As you submit content to the site, you essentially get votes. So it's like they give you a situation. Orc Durgrogs has invaded your territory. What do? You can retreat or you can attack. This is just I'm riffing it for an example. You would then submit something. So let's say you painted a model, submit a picture of it and say, hey, I want to attack. And then your vote would be cast to attack the orc. And that's how it works. The more you participate by engaging the community and stories and painting and games, the more you can get votes to kind of craft the narrative from your perspective. At the end of each round, meaning week, they are calculated and the lore is updated and shared with everyone, with then new prompts coming out and the whole thing happens again. You can coordinate with your team inside of your specific channel, or you can go solo and just enjoy basically watching, which is kind of what I do. I don't have the time to keep up very long, complex conversations with 70 people. I get overwhelmed. Instead, I participate by doing my hobby, doing these videos, of course, which I do consider part of it, submitting votes, and then just having a good time chatting when I can. There are 6 coalitions that all have their own motivations and values and so on, and we'll talk about them in my following Animosity videos. But for now, go read up. Like I said many times, the PDF is in the description, so is the link to their Discord to get signed up, get your notifications squared away, and decide on a coalition. And I'm going to try really hard, folks, this year to be in that Discord every 1 to 2 days for a good amount of time, just hanging out and chatting. If anybody wants to at me, we can hang out together. So thank you all so much for watching and listening. I hope to see you this year in the Animosity 4 campaign, the Bleeding Wilds. I've already got my coalition picked out, but I'm not going to tell you which one it is. And I hope to see you over on the Discord. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.